Hey, what is up guys? My name is Landon and today I am bringing you guys another video. And for today we're doing something not as normal as usual, but it's a series that I've been looking to or toward making for a very long time now, and it is going to be known as Match Playback. Now essentially what this series is made to do, it's meant to highlight a specific map from a particular series that went on in the Call of Duty World League from week to week. My goal is to do these weekly. It's not always going to be a definite that happens, but if I see a certain match that I think really needs to be focused on more, if there was a certain play or certain moment, the banner protect, certain little strategies that went on throughout a certain map or a certain game site that I really want to highlight, I might make a video about it, and we're going to go super in depth with what exactly happened in that game and what ended up getting the team who won that game the victory in the first place. So to get you guys initiated with this series, essentially what we're going to be doing is actually going back to a game that happened in this past week, actually week 4 of the Call of Duty World League for the NA, and we're also going to be looking at a matchup going on between FaZe and eLevate, which actually ended up going down to a game 5. However, we're going to be taking a look at the first hard point, because of course, if it goes down to a game 5, you got to be expecting it was a close series, and this game was exactly that. So without further ado, let's hop right in. Alright, so take a look at the banner protects. Of course, I go and list them for you guys. We actually got the Simtex, High Caliber, Concussion, HCXD cards, Flashbangs, Overclock, Rapid Fire, and the Man of War. Now, on maps like Fringe, especially the Man of War, it's not really that surprising, especially when it comes down to maps like Evac, maps like Breach as well. It's not really that uncharacteristic to see someone walking around with the Man of War and definitely do some work with it. So it's not really a surprise to me that we do see the Man of War be targeted in the end. Of course, we have the 2 regular attachments of both High Caliber and Rapid Fire. Of course, we do have some lethals and tacticals being mentioned, those concussions and flashes. I mean, coming from a dominant slaying team that is FaZe for the most part when it comes down to their hard points, you definitely expect them to be getting rid of those. And of course, they did, trying to make this game as vanilla as possible when it really comes down to it, trying to force those gunfights best in their favor without having any outside annoyances come into play. We also saw the Simtex ban, not really that strange at all, whether it comes down to Simtex or frags. You're normally going to see the Simtex ban a lot more, especially when it comes down to things. And as well, we also have the HCXD card, which really isn't that strange at all. I mean, when it comes down to secondary bans, if things have already been kind of knocked out, it's not really surprising whatsoever to see the HCXD card be targeted. It also works as a great early rotation mechanism, meaning that if you're a player that's trying to get in the hill, you need to win a clutch gunfight, you just pull up the HCXD card, and in some ways, it can be a free kill. It seems that the specialist draft is going to be going for eLevate. They have Heatwave, Scythe, Active Camo, and Kinetic Armor. Of course, the 3 main abilities along with the most dominant weapon in the game. And from the other side, of course, we're going to have a mirror matchup being Zuma, Heatwave, Enable, Active Camo, Scythe for Clayster, and Attach rocking that Kinetic Armor. The reason why I list their names when I'm talking about FaZe is that it's kind of surprising that we actually see Zuma actually pick the Heatwave. Normally, it's a little bit of a swap between him and Enable. Enable normally, and probably one of the most consistent players with that Heatwave, but instead they actually give it to Zuma here, and Enable actually ends up rocking with the Active Camo in the end. So we'll see if that actually ends up being a factor as we go and hop into the game and see exactly how these teams started off on that first hill. Now, off the start, you guys are going to realize, of course, FaZe spawning on that grandma's house side is that they're going to try to do their best, as many teams do on the start of this hill, is to try and send someone through trains, if not 1 or 2 people through trains, to try and get an early pinch established. The reason why they only send 1 player, though, is because Clayster already has the Shiva in place. We kind of talked about the banner protects. That really wasn't something mentioned. And a lot of the times, though, especially with banner protects, how they've kind of evolved as the game has gone on, is that we don't really see that many Shiva bans anymore. So with that in mind, they also have a really dominant weapon, and the very beginning hill is automatically going to lock things down, so they really don't need to send another person through there just to make sure they can kind of count all their costs, for example. Now, as early time starts to tick away, you can start to see that Clayster is going to be in this back Peaches position. Essentially, what he's trying to do after Attach ends up dying from that mini pinch that we just talked about is that Clayster's goal here is to actually just try to stay alive as long as possible. Of course, his goal is to get the kill, but any time for them right now is good time. If you're getting scrappy seconds, that's totally fine. Of course, Clayster ends up dropping. The player who ends up killing Clayster ends up dying in the end, and now eLevate start to establish a little bit of control. Off of their spawn, they start to find a couple kills, and it will be Nogvin actually pinching already, starting through a terrain to try and get a little bit of early control. Of course, when it comes down to these hills, when it comes down to Fringe in general, your main objective is to try to make sure that you are set up perfectly for that Granny's Hill. As the scrap points start to tick away, you can see eLevate has realized that we need to cut our losses. Of course, they realize we don't have too much control in the hill, so they're going to go and make a rotation from their spawn over into this back alley. Of course, we talked about the Shiva being mentioned. Clayster did a great job with it earlier, and Aqua is going to do his very best to try and lock down the only entry point that FaZe has right now, which is going to be through 10. He does it pretty effectively, along with Felony getting a kill in his own place, and that'll be them set up in a perfect position to lock down a lot of seconds. And we're actually going to take a look at the mini-map right now. So with 4 seconds left, you'd really like to see a rotation already coming in from FaZe. Of course, they locked down a lot of hill time. In the first hill of the game, you don't really see a score spread like this that often. So with that into consideration, you can see that eLevate has a perfect setup right now. Of course, his Felony ends up nearly dropping. They do have 3 players inside of the hill, 2 of them watching the flank, Aqua as well, and pretty good position, especially with that Shiva. Definitely going to be very hard for FaZe to lock down this early setup that eLevate is currently making. So after, a second that's been given to eLevate, FaZe immediately rush onto that hill with a 3-man push, and it ends up working out in their favor very, very well. Attach ends up getting a nice 2-piece, while Glacier ends up dropping, though. They're able to get time effectively, and it ends up working out in their favor, meaning that early rotation that eLevate made really means nothing. They're also locking down spawns. Nagafin ends up falling as well, and that is big for the overall FaZe roster, because now they have the 50-5 lead, and they're looking to be in an even greater position to make this one even more out of eLevate's favor. So as the time ended up taking down in the hill, it was Nagafin who ended up grabbing a good amount of scrap seconds that is going to make the lead a little bit easier for the eLevate side. But of course, when it comes down to rotations, that rotation over to Grandma is absolutely crucial, and maintaining that back silo spawn is going to be big, and it seems that FaZe already realized that we don't have enough time to challenge that. They already rotated with about 18 seconds left in the hill, meaning that eLevate now has a little bit more points in their favor, but the rotation from FaZe is overall a great decision. Now, Felony does a really good job here of course, getting behind the opposition, hopping in the hill and grabbing a kill in the whole midst of that, and he's able to lock it down with an AR in this position, which I think is really, really important when it comes down to a hill like Grandma's. You need to have an AR, at least have a 1 AR in the top window, constantly locking down whether it's Strands or through middle street. He does it very effectively, but unfortunately for him, he ends up getting dropped, and now we're actually going to see a potential retake coming in from FaZe as Glacier gets a nice shot in the back on Vicento to make sure that they now have established spawns. Now this is a big combination of kills that actually end up going in eLevate's favor. Glacier loses that fight as well as Vicento, who ends up spawning there, ends up taking out Attach in the long run. So as time starts to rack down, FaZe have some good pushes here and there, but eLevate is always in the hill, constantly challenging, making sure that no points are easily awarded to the side of FaZe. So early rotations start to come in. Glacier is here with definitely the weapon of choice being the Shiva, but he ends up dropping yet again to the nice AR shots of the eLevate side. Whether it's been Aqua, whether it's been Felony, they've always been locking him down, and it's the reason why he's not having the best game so far, starting at 11-11. Now what we're about to see is a great team fight get ready to go down between these two sides. So as the team fight starts to go on, you see Felony actually grab a great sequence of kills. He ends up finding 2 and also finds a 3rd there with his active camo. But right here we see a great sequence of kills go down for FaZe. They're able to lock things down. The heat wave also gets enabled shortly before this, and they're able to get a nice team fight won in their favor finally for this game. Now what this is going to do, this is actually going to spawn the eLevate players into back alley, which is the exact opposite spawn that you want to have on this game, because now they're able to know exactly where you're going to be coming from, whether it's from turbines, whether it's from peaches, or either inside a tool room. And with you already having a massive second delay, being about 5 or 6 seconds to get back to that hard point, it's very difficult for you to retake this one. That's exactly what FaZe did, and a great job for them, because now they're going to have a pretty good lead. So as the second rotation for hills start to come into play, of course we are currently at 89-80, still in favor of FaZe. By no means is that a massive lead for them. Now what we see here is, of course, FaZe have the early rotations over toward middle. I say early rotations because there's always one player constantly in the hill waiting for those rotations to come into play. That player was being Zuma. Of course, Zuma ends up dropping, and in that play, Glacier ends up bringing out the sides to make sure that a lot of that early time that they grabbed actually in the beginning hardpoint doesn't happen to them again. And in Glacier's play there, what he attempts to try to do is, of course, since Zuma ends up dropping, the farthest pushed up player, he pulls up the scythe in some ways more of a defensive manner, but also to try to lock down things to give his team an opportunity to rush in the hill as easy as possible. Despite a nice sequence of kills that end up coming from Glacier, eLevate do a fantastic job at realizing that his time with that scythe is going to be limited, having one player inside of L try to do their best to try to stay alive as long as possible. One player ends up coming from fences, and they lock down the scythe pretty effectively. And along with that, they also get a nice 4 down. And in getting that 4 down, you're actually going to see Nagafin pull out the Kuda and do some work with it. He had a pretty slow start to the game, but of course he starts to turn things up once he brings out the Kuda and rushes inside a barn. So as middle hill starts to come to an end, of course, not really many seconds being awarded, but seconds that did get awarded end up going over to eLevate. Especially with that nice push that we just talked about from Nagafin, it was Vicento who ends up getting the last couple seconds of scrap points, but also makes a nice overhead wall run to find a great kill coming in from 10, meaning that FaZe now has a player less to fight in what would be early control heading into Scrapyard. Along with the combination of kills coming from Nagafin, he ends up using his kinetic armor and ends up finding 2, but ends up getting dropped just to his left, meaning that FaZe now has a little bit of control, but like I said, there are players coming forward, there aren't that many. Now as FaZe start to lock down a good amount of points, what they end up doing is sending out 2 players inside of 10, which is very, very risky from them. It also puts eLevate in a very precarious situation. Do they try to establish early control for Grandma's, or do they want to fight that contested time that's being awarded toward FaZe? And a good decision starts to come in from them. They lock those 2 players down, and they make the rotation over to Grandma's, giving FaZe those last couple seconds inside of scraps. And right here we see a brilliant retake coming in from FaZe. Now as we take a look at the minimap just in the left corner, you can see the amount of kills going in FaZe's favor are absolutely massive, and Attach wins a huge gunfight over on Felony inside of Grandma's. And that is a huge retake for them, because of course we just talked about eLevate realizing that they make the rotations over, but they immediately get retaken. eLevate really has only one more opportunity to try to lock down these last 20 seconds, which of course we end up seeing Attach drop 2 great kills along with having his teammate in his back, and now eLevate are forced to try and regroup, heading into trains with a pretty big deficit in front of them. And normally what we're going to see out of a team who ends up losing Grandma's, of course being on that early rotation heading into trains, is that they're going to try to establish a lot of control, making sure that they they do have a good amount of pressure heading into that Peach's truck. So with those guys dropping, in some ways that early aggressiveness doesn't end up working out in their favor, meaning that FaZe now has in some ways a dominant gunfight and a team fight now in their favor. Enable ends up dropping Nogafit, and now Felony is left to fend for himself, trying to hold off as many seconds as he can until his teammates gets back in the hill to try and protect him. As time ticks off, eLevate do a good job throughout this entire hardpoint of making two-man pushes into the hill, whether it was Aqua's big kills with the Shiva or Felony's great job at holding down the objective in an efficient manner. They do a great job at locking this one down and in a sense make this lead a little bit easier on themselves heading in and back toward middle. And of course, who other than FaZe to be on that early rotation? However though, eLevate do counter with a great pinch, one player coming in through bricks, which of course FaZe did not counter with. eLevate do a great job at that, and now their Shiva player has earned streaks and is also at the very high peak of the hardpoint, meaning that he's going to have constant players looking over his side and also being able to lock down this head glitch very effectively. Now what you're about to see is a huge turning point in the game, because both Aqua and I believe Nogafin end up spawning in a brilliant position just outside of back alley, because of course rotations are about to come in. Aqua has his Shiva out and he quickly switches back to his RK5 to find a nice kill over on Enable. And he also ends up finding one kill through middle map, looking outside of Brick's window. Now in finding that kill, as we can kind of take a look at the mini map right now, his main objective right now is to split the map in half. And splitting the map in half, he's going to give his team an easy opportunity to make the rotation through where he just spawned at in back alley, and also be able to get them in there effectively while also trying to get the spawns later down the line. Now in calling in the streaks, Aqua isn't able to find any kills with it, but he's able to find one with an RK5 and also tag up one player, making it very weak at the back of the map. So with the main front of eLevate's defense dropping, FaZe now have to fare off against the already stacked second wave of eLevate's defense, which they unfortunately aren't able to do either. So little by little, an entire team ends up dropping from FaZe, and they're left to try to make a huge team push to try to lock down as many seconds as they possibly can, realizing that eLevate are on the come up and they're very close to taking even the lead. So what FaZe's idea is to try to do is to make a team push from the front and also have one player in the back to try and finish off that pinch. However, as he enables his kinetic armor, the scythe player, being Aqua, finds one Enable, turns around very quickly, and also has his teammate there to solidify the kill. The kinetic armor player ends up dropping, not finding anyone. Now eLevate ended up dropping, which is the big point in this game, because eLevate ended up dropping through those two kills, and FaZe, granted, yeah, they have a good amount of kills going in their favor, but they send all three players through 10, as eLevate have already spawned up, and they're already in a great position to lock down Grandma's yet again, which easily could be the defining factor on who walks away with this victory. And in sending those three players through 10, they've now put themselves in a very awkward position, because the ARs of this team, both Felony and Aqua, absolutely thrive, finding all three down. Blazer's quickly losing his scythe, which could have potentially been a huge factor for them coming into that rotation over to Grandma's, especially if he can be in that back silos position. Now Nogafin actually ends up clearing out the last hill just to make sure that there wouldn't be any more pinches from 10, and now they're able to lock down both sides effectively, watching through middle, street, and also through train, meaning that eLevate are in an absolute perfect position to walk away with this game and to potentially lock down every single second inside of Grandma's. There is one last potential team push that FaZe can make. So as Enable ends up dropping, eLevate think the push is over, however that's not the case. Attach easily catches an AR player, being Aqua, off guard, and in being in this position, he locks down one point trying to watch from stairs, but he doesn't realize that the flank is coming into play, and none of his teammates end up calling that out, because you can easily see that Attach has no idea this pinch is coming into play. He's locking down one part of the hill, and that's not a normal spot for someone to be sitting in. So as Attach dies, the insult to injury is what eLevate kind of provides. The frags also start to work back in eLevate's favor, and they lock down the hill, winning the game 250 to 231, despite the last second opportunities that FaZe was trying to make through a back alley smoke push, which did not end up working out in their favor either. They walk away with the victory, but it without a doubt was not an easy W in the long run. We talked about FaZe's early lead, their early rotations, which seemed to work out in their very early game, and their great Shiva play coming in from Clayster along with the scythe play. But in the end, it was eLevate's team pushes, the two men rushing inside of trains, and when it came down to the two main objective hills, being inside of trains and also being inside of Grandma's, eLevate did a fantastic job at rotating, and also it was a big play coming in towards Scrapyard, in which case Aqua was able to lock down hill time, getting those streaks, and also in a brilliant position to grab some kills in middle map, and making that rotation for his team a lot more easy. And it without a doubt is a questionable play for Clayster to be the one player who stays inside of the hill while he is ticking down time on his scythe, and while sending three players inside through 10, all of them fall, and that definitely sets up eLevate for a perfect opportunity to take and walk away with the game. The definite scrappiness that ended up going down with Attach finding an opportunity to hop inside the hard point, but with having no teammate communication to tell him that a flank was coming in, that was definitely the ending factor for what would have been a great FaZe victory. And of course, from the eLevate side, the ARs easily ran true, seeing that Felony and Aqua easily leading the way, and also Vicento doing a great job in his particular role, grabbing 1 minute and 33 seconds inside of the hard point. And we will, as time does go on, talk about the plays that players are making throughout the entire season, especially with Zuma being more effectively when it comes down to the objective, switching back to an SMG role, which in my opinion, you've definitely got to be considering the fact of when it came down to the specialist draft in the beginning of the game, that transition of giving the heat wave to Zuma and letting Enable rock with the active camo, which in turn definitely could have worked out in their favor, but maybe and potentially due to the lack of that happening in their previous encounters, easily could have definitely hurt them when it came down to when the specialist started to come into use. As far as the game would conclude, it would come down to the final game over on Redwood search and destroy, where it would actually be FaZe who walks away with both search victories, winning both game 2 and of course that game 5, and in the end they end up winning the last search and destroy 6-2 by having Clayster end out on an incredible 10 streak. Yeah guys, that's going to do it for our first episode of Pro Match Playback. If you guys did enjoy or would like to see future content from me or from this series, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. If you guys of course did enjoy this particular episode, feel free to go ahead and leave a like. Thank you guys so much for watching yet again. I will see you all in another video. Have a great day, and until next time, peace out.